The hypnotist's report stated, quote, "Initially, the subject indicated an admixture of desired susceptibility to hypnosynthesis, but deep-seated resistance due to the presence of a post-hypnotic block. This block appeared to have been connected with the presence, nightmarish, of a Mrs. Krebs. The total removal of this block may pave the way for maximum results," unquote. The hypnotist reported that during the pre-trance warm-up, he examined Castillo and found little scars on his forehead, chest, stomach, and fingers. Castillo told him that the scars were the result of a car accident in the U.S., which happened when some men were chasing him while he was trying to deliver, quote, "an envelope of some kind," unquote. Castillo mentioned that after the crash, he'd awakened in bandages in a hospital bed. Names which were presented to Castillo in the pre-trance interview were repeated while he was under hypnosis. He recognized the names of several individuals who were then gaining notoriety in connection with New Orleans District Attorney Jim Garrison's JFK assassination investigation, but Castillo revealed that he knew some of the people by other names. Throughout his recollections, Castillo suffered stomach cramps, said he felt a weight on his legs, unquote, and cried out in pain a number of times. Through the manipulations of the hypnotist, he was able to recall that on many different occasions he had been taken to a factory. Mrs. Krebs and Castillo had always driven to the factory in her car, and they had always entered through the front door. Castillo could not remember the exact location of the factory, other than that it was located, quote, "way outside Chicago," unquote. He spoke of a romantic relationship with Mrs. Krebs, but while one moment he spoke of her as nice and kind, unquote, in the next breath he said he hated her. According to the hypnotist's report, one thing was certain. Whoever Mrs. Krebs was, she, quote, "controlled the subject's activities and consciousness like a nightmare," unquote. Eliciting information from Castillo was no easy task. Over the course of many interrogations, the hypnotist discovered that Castillo could be taken to 4 different hypnotic levels. It appeared to the hypnotist that each level came closer to the truth. He labeled these states Zombie 1, Zombie 2, Zombie 3, and Zombie 4. Depending upon which zombie state Castillo was in, his mannerisms and identity changed. In the first state, Zombie 1, Castillo believed he was a Loriaga, and he told tales of anti-American espionage. During Zombie 2, he took on the identity of a tough-talking CIA agent in trouble. While in Zombie 3, again Castillo emerged as an agent whose cover had been blown. At this level, however, he experienced a compulsion to kill himself. On the day he was to have assassinated Marcos, Castillo responded to a program he had revealed in an earlier interrogation. He attempted suicide in his jail cell by swallowing a bottle of epoxy glue. The Zombie 4 state revealed that Castillo's true name was Manuel Angel Ramirez, a 29-year-old native of the Bronx, New York. In this state, he had no recollection of his youth except for a hazy memory of his father, who Ramirez believed was a highly placed official at the agency, unquote. As Ramirez, Castillo said that most of his life had been spent in training with or on missions for the Special Operations Group of the CIA. He remembered one training camp where he learned clandestine and martial arts. Throughout the interrogations, the theme of programmed agent, unquote, emerged. Castillo's testimony under hypnosis was that of an individual whose identity had been completely erased and reconstructed several times over. On May 30th, 1967, Castillo spontaneously went from his normal state into a zombie state. In answering Castillo's question about transfer from the hospital to jail, the hypnotist unknowingly said, quote, "That depends entirely on the big chief, you know," unquote. Upon hearing these words, a blank look came over Castillo's eyes, and all efforts to wake him were at first unsuccessful. The hypnotist then called out a series of phrases from Castillo's notebooks and found that the phrases, "I will win if I don't lose my nerve," and, quote, "I must believe myself or no one else will believe me," unquote, awakened him. And Iptak will continue.
The next day was Castillo's birthday. The NBI planned to give him a birthday party as an excuse to get him drunk to see if his behavior changed. Castillo, it seemed, had a huge capacity for liquor. Drunk to the eyeballs, he saluted one of the NBI agents and called him Colonel. "Where do we fly tonight, Colonel?" he asked. The agent quickly told him that he was to fly the same mission as the last one. Castillo said, "Haiphong," then drunkenly fell into bed. By the way, Haiphong, of course, is the Haiphong harbor area in North Vietnam. Castillo said Haiphong, then drunkenly fell into bed. He dug his fingers into his throat and vomited. He cried out for a doctor, and between vomit spasms rattled out his mission to the hypnotist. He said his real name was Manuel Angel Ramirez, his rank was sergeant, and he was assigned to the Strategic Air Tactical Command in South Vietnam. He said his immediate superior was Colonel Summers. He was in Saigon in January 1966, he related, and had flown B-26 missions over Haiphong and Hanoi. He came to Manila, he said, to kill President Marcos in June, when the president would make a public speech. If his assassination attempt failed, someone else would get Marcos before the end of 1968, Castillo added. "I'm dying," he groaned, and pleaded again for a doctor. He thought he was dying from a heart attack. "If I die today," he warned, "my secrets die with me." When the NBI doctor arrived, he examined Castillo and pronounced him fit, except for his obviously drunken state. He tried to give him a shot to calm him down, but Castillo protested violently. The doctor then asked him to take a pill, which he did without resistance. 2 days later, Castillo was given another medical examination by Dr. Alexis Guerrero of the NBI. A series of tests were given to measure his breathing rate, pulse rate, sweat production, and other functions. All of these tests were performed in zombie states 1, 2, and 3. The doctor noted that in each state there was a vast difference in pulse rate, and assumed, because of what Castillo said, and the reactions of his heart and respiration, that he was experiencing some emotional agitation. Sodium amytal was administered while he was in the zombie 3 state. According to the hypnotist, Castillo did not even notice he'd been given the injection. Soon he began to talk as he'd done previously while in the drunken state. "I'm Sergeant Manuel Ramirez of the Tactical Air Command," he said. When asked to reveal his base, he said, "You'll never know," adding, "I'm a pilot. I've flown a B-26. "The NBI are suckers," he said a little while later. "They thought they arrested me, but there I was, waiting for them to get me. I know of a great plot. I am supposed to expose it after I'm arrested. I know I will eventually return to my country." And in parentheses, the author has put the U.S. "I'll go through the motions of a trial, conviction, and jail as a criminal. After a couple of months, I will be released for my next assignment." Awakened from the zombie state, Castillo was told all about these various states and his strange behavior while in them. The hypnotist explained how he thought Castillo had been programmed. Castillo seemed baffled by this news. He said that he was not told by anybody about being programmed. He said that, quote, Papa didn't even know about the zombie state. He grew agitated, saying that if he were in the zombie state, he might even kill Papa. And then, quote, the agency would go to blazes. Hell will break loose on the guy responsible for the zombie, unquote. Asked in a trance to identify Papa, Castillo said that he was not just a guy, but was his real father. He described him as having a mustache and smoking a pipe. He said he was the only one who could send the agency to, quote, blazes if he, Castillo, was killed on this mission. He said that Papa's initials were A.D., and that his first name was Alan. He said that he would personally tell Papa about the zombie when he got back. Well, before Dave continues, we should just state in that whether the what Castillo said was true or whether it was something that he was led to believe or not, the Papa that seems to be being identified here is fairly obviously meant to be, if it is not actually Alan Dulles, who was, of course, the head of the CIA at that time. Of course, the initials A.D., the first name Alan, and the pipe, the mustache, the whole thing, obviously is Alan Dulles. Whether that really was him or whether this was something that Castillo was conditioned to say, well, we can discuss these different possibilities later on.
Okay, before continuing, you listen to KFJC Los Altos Hills. Okay, continuing now with the narrative of Castillo Ramirez, or whatever his name was, this very interesting hypno-programmed assassin. After more than 40 hypnotic sessions lasting from 1 to 5 hours each, covering the period from April 3rd to June 25th, 1967, the hypnotist reviewed the data and summarized it for the Chief of the Defense Intelligence Division of the National Bureau of Investigation. The summary report not only involved Castillo in the assassination of John Kennedy, it disclosed that Castillo was a hypno-programmed zombie who would kill on cue. The summary report stated, quote, "The zombie phenomenon referred to here is a somnambulistic behavior displayed by the subject in a conditioned response to a series of words, phrases, and statements apparently unknown to the subject during his normal waking state. While under the influence of such a zombie state, the subject closed his eyes, rose bodily, walked, triggered a pistol, stared blankly, and fell to the floor with no apparent sense of physical pain. As far as could be determined experimentally, the zombie behavior had for its objective the assassination of President Ferdinand Marcos of the Republic of the Philippines," unquote. The report also stated, quote, "Neither the presence nor the discovery of the zombie states in our subject should be regarded as noble or unique. If anything, the only remarkable character of the zombie state in our subject is its deeply ingrained and systematic presentation, indicating a certain disturbing degree of conditioning." Note that phrase, a disturbing degree of conditioning. In a lengthy summary, the NBI hypnotist and deprogrammer of Castillo recounted the details of exactly how he had uncovered the key that unlocked the programmed assassin's mind. The letters XBGUMIDUTYBX were found scribbled on the white surface of a cigarette package which was in Castillo's possession at the time of his arrest. The paper had been folded carefully and tucked into the back of his watch. Castillo had told investigators that this piece of paper was given him by a man named Luis Mauricio. Castillo said that Mauricio also gave him money. Mauricio was known to the NBI as a member of the Huck Guerrillas. Placing Castillo in a trance, the hypnotist called out the series of letters on the cigarette package. Castillo did not react. He then tried calling out the letters, pausing at different places. He found that when he paused between the G and the U, saying XBG, a pause, UMIDUTYBX, Castillo would reply with, "I am myself to kill," unquote. The hypnotist then tried the letters one at a time, and then in different combinations. While many of the combinations produced no response, the following were significant. When the hypnotist said X, unquote, Castillo quickly answered Mauricio, unquote. When the hypnotist said BGU, Castillo slowly said, "I am myself," unquote. When the hypnotist said MI, Castillo answered, "To kill," unquote. In another session, the hypnotist experimented with saying Luis Castillo as a command. The hypnotist reported, quote, "A pathetic sight takes place after this. The subject turns his pistol to his own temple and squeezes the trigger as many times as his name is repeated." Whenever the hypnotist would say, quote, "June 12, 1967, 12 o'clock, June 22, 1967, July 4, 1967, or January 1, 1968, Castillo would invariably aim the pistol and squeeze the trigger. The hypnotist found that after the preparatory command to put him in a trace, if Castillo's eyes were open and he saw a photograph of President Marcos, he would, with no verbal instructions, aim and repeatedly squeeze the trigger of his pistol, following the photo wherever it was taken around the room. If the hypnotist said the word kill while Castillo was following this program, he would drop heavily to the floor and remain motionless. The hypnotist's report also includes Castillo's amazing story about his participation in yet another organized assassination attempt. Under hypnosis, Castillo said that the assassination had happened before noon, unquote. He remembered being with a man called Lake, unquote, whom he described as a tall man weighing about 190 pounds, with a hawk-like nose, black hair, and oriental eyes set in a long face. Lake spoke with a foreign accent which Castillo could not identify. He said that he remembered meeting Lake along with 4 or 5 other men in an airport. They then drove together in a black car to a building. Castillo said that he thought the group included both Americans and foreigners, and he thought one man was Spanish.
Continuing. When the group arrived at the building, Castillo said they climbed to a second-floor room, which he described after some uncertainty as brown. The room contained packing crates, a short brown table, a typewriter, and two, quote, lift-up glass windows overlooking a street. Lake opened a black suitcase, which Castillo described as a bowling bag with a zipper and lock. It contained a scope and pieces of a rifle, which Lake assembled. He set the scope at 500 yards and gave the rifle to Castillo. Castillo did not seem certain about the make or caliber of the rifle, but finally said that he